Ronan was 36 years old and made $58,000 a year as a facilities technician for Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. It was a good, solid job that paid the mortgage on their small but well-kept house on Federal Hill, a $450,000 three-bedroom he'd painted himself. He drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it and wore an $89 Timex watch his wife, Asha, had once called aggressively practical. At 7:15 a.m. on a Monday morning, he stood on their front porch, the air thick with the promise of August humidity, and watched Asha load a sleek, black, $1,200 Toomey suitcase into the back of a waiting Uber Black. She was dressed in what she called her conference armor, an impeccably tailored $1,800 Stella McCartney pantsuit in a severe shade of navy blue, her feet enclosed in $950 Jimmy Choo pumps that made a sharp, definitive click on the concrete steps. "The keynote speaker is at 9 tomorrow, so I have to be there for the pre-conference networking dinner tonight," she said, not looking at him. Her focus was on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. "It's at the Westin Copley Place in Boston. Super high-level stuff. All the VPs will be there." Ronan nodded, holding a thermal mug of coffee he'd brewed for her, the 22-a-pound single-origin beans she insisted on. He'd woken up at 5:30 a.m. to make it for her, just the way she liked it. "Drive safe. Text me when you get to the hotel." She finally looked up, her expression a careful blend of impatience and affection that never quite settled on one or the other. "Ronan, it's an Uber. I'm not driving, and I'll be swamped the second I walk in. Don't wait up. This conference will run late every single night. I probably won't be able to talk much until I'm back on Sunday." She took the coffee, took a delicate sip, and handed it back to him, half full. "It's a little bitter today." She leaned in, gave him a kiss that barely brushed his cheek, the air around her smelling of her $340 Baccarat Rouge 540 perfume. "Lock the deadbolt, and don't forget to water the hydrangeas." Then she was gone, climbing into the back of the gleaming black SUV without a backward glance. He stood there for a long moment, watching the car disappear down the street, the half-full mug of expensive coffee growing cool in his hand. He had no idea that in 3 days, his entire world, the one he had so carefully maintained, would be reduced to ashes. He just knew the coffee tasted fine to him. Have you ever had a feeling that something was wrong, but you couldn't put your finger on it? A tiny splinter in your mind that you keep ignoring? Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that way, because Ronan was living in that feeling every single day. The facade of their life was built on a foundation of such small, meticulous details. Ronan believed in the power of domestic normalcy, in the quiet rhythm of a shared life. Their house on Dean Street was a testament to his belief. He'd spent a full month 2 summers ago stripping and refinishing the original hardwood floors, a project that cost him $800 in materials and countless hours of sweat. He was the one who mowed the small patch of lawn, who fixed the perpetually dripping faucet in the upstairs bathroom with a $4 washer, who made sure the pantry was always stocked with Asha's favorite 12-a-box organic quinoa. Their evenings, when she wasn't away at one of her increasingly frequent conferences, followed a predictable pattern. He would get home from his shift at Brown around 5:30 p.m., his work uniform smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and old books. He'd change into a pair of worn-out jeans and a faded university sweatshirt and start dinner. He did most of the cooking, finding a simple pleasure in chopping vegetables and measuring spices. Asha would usually arrive around 7 p.m., sweeping into the house with a flurry of activity, dropping her $3,500 Celine handbag on the kitchen island, and immediately launching into a detailed account of the corporate battles she had fought and won that day. "You would not believe what Mark from Acquisitions tried to pull," she'd say, pouring herself a glass of $40 Sauvignon Blanc. "He tried to claim my team's metrics for his quarterly report. I had to pull up the analytics from the Salesforce integration right there in the meeting. The look on his face, priceless. Ronan would listen, nodding along, stirring a pot of pasta sauce that had cost maybe $15 to make from scratch. He was proud of her. She was a marketing director for a major pharmaceutical company, a job she said was incredibly demanding but came with a salary that dwarfed his own. It was her income that afforded them the luxuries he never would have considered. The Toomey luggage, the designer clothes, the biannual vacations to places like St. Bart's, where a single dinner could cost $500. He assumed her salary was around $250,000, but she was always vague about the exact number. "It's complicated," she'd say. "Bonuses, stock options. You wouldn't get it." He didn't press. He trusted her. He saw the evidence of her hard work all around them. The 70-inch OLED television in the living room, a $3,000 purchase she'd made for his birthday last year. The brand new $1,500 Vitamix blender on the kitchen counter that was mostly used for her morning smoothies. The art on the walls, abstract prints she'd ordered from a gallery in New York for $5,000. His contributions were less visible, but to him, more essential. The sturdy shelves he'd built in the garage, the vegetable garden he tended in the backyard that supplied their summer salads, the quiet, unwavering stability he provided. He was the frame. She was the vibrant, expensive painting. That was their arrangement, and for a long time, he thought it worked perfectly. He thought back to last Christmas. She'd bought him a beautiful, high-end $700 drone. "So you can take amazing videos of the campus," she'd said. He'd been touched. He used it a few times, but it mostly sat in its box. For her, he'd spent 2 months painstakingly restoring a vintage armchair he'd found at a flea market for $50. He'd stripped it, sanded it, reupholstered it in a soft gray velvet that cost $200. When she saw it, she smiled politely. "Oh, that's nice, honey. Very resourceful." The chair now sat in the corner of their bedroom, usually draped with the clothes she'd worn that day. He had no idea how wrong he was about what their life was built on. He thought it was a partnership. He was about to learn it was a performance. The cruelty wasn't overt at first. It was a slow drip erosion of his confidence, a series of casual dismissals that left him feeling small and insignificant. It was in the way she'd talk about his job. They'd be at a dinner party with her friends, all of them sharp-edged lawyers and consultants in expensive suits. Someone would inevitably ask Ronan what he did. "Oh, Ronan keeps the lights on at Brown," Asha would say with a bright, dismissive laugh, patting his hand. "He's my wonderful, handy husband. If a pipe bursts or a fuse blows, he's my guy." The table would chuckle politely, and the conversation would immediately shift back to 7-figure real estate deals and corporate mergers. Ronan would just smile, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. He wasn't ashamed of his job. He liked the quiet dignity of it, the feeling of being essential to the functioning of a massive, historic institution. But in her words, his work was reduced to a caricature of a simple handyman. One evening, about 6 months ago, he'd come home excited. "They gave me a raise," he announced, standing in the kitchen doorway. 3%? It's another $1,600 a year. Asha was scrolling through her iPad, looking at a website for luxury watches. She didn't look up. "That's great, honey." Her tone was flat, distracted. She tapped on a picture of a gold Cartier watch. "This one is $12,000. Can you believe it? So classic." The joy drained out of him. His hard-earned raise, a recognition of his dedication, felt like a pittance, a joke, next to the casual number she'd just thrown out. He felt a flash of anger. "Does my money even matter to you, Asha?" She finally looked at him, her eyes cold. "Of course it matters. It pays the water bill. Every little bit helps." She went back to her iPad, effectively ending the conversation. It was a devastatingly casual remark, reducing his entire salary, his entire contribution, to the cost of their monthly water usage. He swallowed his anger and went out to the garage to work on fixing an old lawnmower engine, the smell of grease and oil a small comfort. That was the moment the outrage began to accumulate, a silent, growing ledger in his soul. The conferences had become more and more frequent over the last 14 months. It seemed like every other month she was packing that expensive Toomey bag and heading off to Boston or New York or Chicago. She always had compelling reasons. "It's the annual leadership summit," she'd explain, or "This is a mandatory training for the new compliance software." He never questioned it. Why would he? He was proud of her ambition. But the distance between them was growing. When she was home, she was often agitated, her phone always in her hand, her screen angled away from him. She'd have hushed, tense conversations in the other room, and if he walked in, she'd end the call abruptly. "Work stuff," she'd snap. "You wouldn't understand." The final, most brutal scene before she left for this last trip had happened a week prior. He had been balancing their main checking account, something he did every month. He noticed a series of cash withdrawals from ATMs near her office, all for $500, the maximum daily limit. Over the course of a week, she had taken out $3,500 in cash. He approached her carefully that evening while she was getting ready for bed. "Hey, Ash, I was just looking at the account. I saw a bunch of cash withdrawals. Is everything okay? Did you have a big expense I forgot about?" She whirled around from her vanity table, where she was applying a $90 night cream. Her face was a mask of fury. "Are you spying on me, Ronan? Are you tracking my spending like I'm some kind of child?" "No, I look at the account every month. It's our money. I just wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Everything is fine," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "It was for an off-site team-building event. I had to pay for catering in cash. It's called cost of doing business. Maybe if you ever ran anything bigger than a plumbing snake, you'd understand that." The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He felt like he'd been slapped. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked out of the room, the image of her furious face reflected in the mirror behind her. He went downstairs and sat in the dark living room for hours. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. He was a man drowning in plain sight, in his own home, and the person standing on the shore, watching him go under, was his wife. The outrage was no longer a small ledger. It was a heavy, iron-bound book, and the pages were filling up fast. Wednesday, August 10th, 12:47 p.m., Day 3. Ronan was in his office, a small, windowless room in the sub-basement of the Sciences Library at Brown. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and ozone from the humming servers in the next room. He was eating his lunch at his gray metal desk, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, and a bottle of water. The total cost of his meal was probably around $4.50. He was scrolling through a work email about a planned steam shutdown in the building when a strange prickling sensation ran up the back of his neck. He hadn't heard from Asha since a brief, dismissive text on Monday night that just said, "Arrived v busy." He'd sent a text yesterday morning saying, "Hope the conference is going well. Love you." It had been delivered but not read. He told himself she was just busy, networking, being the high-powered executive she was. But the silence felt different this time. It felt heavier. He pulled out his personal phone, an older model iPhone. On a whim, he opened the Find My app. They had shared their locations years ago, a practical measure for a married couple. He rarely ever looked at it. He tapped on her icon, expecting to see her avatar, a smiling photo from a vacation they'd taken 2 years ago, located squarely over downtown Boston, probably right near Copley Square. The map loaded. His own blue dot was a steady pulse in Providence. He zoomed out, panning north towards Boston. But her picture wasn't there. He kept zooming out, a knot of confusion tightening in his gut. Where was she? He scanned the map of New England, then the tri-state area, and then he saw it. Her smiling avatar was pulsing steadily 180 miles south of Boston. It was in New Jersey. He zoomed in, his heart starting to pound a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. The map resolved into streets, then buildings. The icon was sitting directly on top of a massive complex. He zoomed in further, his thumb trembling slightly. The label appeared in crisp digital letters: Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa, Atlantic City. The turkey sandwich suddenly felt like a ball of lead in his stomach. He stared at the screen, the bright, cheerful picture of his wife in a sundress mocking him from the location of a high-stakes casino. Boston, the Westin Copley Place, the keynote speaker, the VPs. Every word was a lie, a carefully constructed, elaborate lie. He felt the air leave his lungs. The hum of the servers seemed to grow louder, filling the silence in his tiny office. He didn't feel rage, not yet. He felt a profound, bottomless cold. It was the icy certainty of a man who has just discovered that the entire foundation of his life is a fraud. He took a screenshot. Timestamp 12:51 p.m. Location: Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa. He sent it to his email. Evidence. The word appeared in his mind, clear and sharp as a shard of glass. He sat there for a full 10 minutes, just staring at the gray wall, the phone dark in his hand. The part of his brain that fixed things, the methodical, practical part that diagnosed a faulty HVAC unit or traced a plumbing leak, took over. The emotional part of him was in shock, locked away behind a wall of ice. The technician remained. The problem was identified. Now, he needed to understand the scope of the damage. He needed data, and he knew exactly where to start looking. The phone call came at 8:15 p.m. that night. Ronan was sitting at their small dining room table, his laptop open. The screen was filled with spreadsheets, numbers that told a story of pure horror. He had spent the last 5 hours logged into their joint accounts, the checking, the savings, the credit cards she managed. He'd found the family login details in a small notebook in his desk drawer, where they kept all the important passwords. He had meticulously gone back 14 months, the time frame she'd mentioned her job had gotten so much more demanding. He saw the pattern immediately. A conference trip would be preceded by a series of those $500 in cash withdrawals. Then, while she was supposedly in Chicago or Boston, there would be massive charges on credit cards he didn't even know they had, cards in her name only, but linked to their financial ecosystem. He saw charges from the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, from Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, and now from the Borgata. They weren't for hotel rooms or nice dinners. They were cash advances. Thousands at a time, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. A wire transfer from their savings account, the one he thought held their $75,000 emergency fund, for $40,000. It was dated 6 months ago. The current balance of that account was $257.34. He added it all up. The credit card debt, the drained savings, the cash withdrawals. It came to $182,450, a number so large, so catastrophic on his $58,000 salary that it felt unreal. It was a lifetime of debt, a life sentence. When his phone rang, her picture flashing on the screen, his face was a calm mask. He had to play dumb. He had to be the simple, trusting husband she thought he was. He let it ring 3 times, took a deep breath, and answered. "Hey, you," he said, his voice perfectly normal. "Hey." She sounded tired, but there was a brittle energy in her voice. "Sorry I haven't called. It's been absolutely insane. Back-to-back sessions, and the networking is just exhausting." "Sounds intense," Ronan said, looking at a credit card statement that showed a $7,500 cash advance from a Borgata ATM processed at 4:30 p.m. that afternoon. "How's Boston?" "Oh, same old," she said with a little laugh. "The hotel is nice. The Westin is always reliable. We had dinner tonight at this amazing steakhouse. You would have hated it. Way too stuffy." Every word was a nail in the coffin of their marriage. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie. He was an actor playing a part. "Well, don't work too hard. Make sure you get some rest." "I'll try. Listen, I have to run. We have an early start tomorrow. The VP of Global Strategy is speaking." She paused. "Hey, a weird thing happened. My card got declined when I was buying a coffee this afternoon. The Amex. I had to use my Visa. Can you check and see if there's an issue with the account? I don't have time to deal with it." He knew exactly why it was declined. She'd maxed it out. The limit was $25,000. He looked at the statement on his screen. It was full of cash advances. "Sure," he said, his voice even. "I'll take a look. Probably just a fraud alert or something. I'll sort it out." "Thanks, baby. You're the best," she said, her voice warm and condescending. "My reliable guy. What would I do without you? I'll try to call tomorrow. Love you." "Love you too," he said, and the line went dead. He hung up the phone and felt nothing. The wall of ice inside him was solid. He had the location. He had the financial records. And now he had the final piece of evidence he needed. Her voice, on the phone, lying directly to his face from 180 miles away. He made a note of the date and time of the call. He was no longer a husband. He was a man gathering evidence for a case that had already been tried and convicted in the quiet, methodical court of his own mind. Thursday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, Ronan was sitting in a leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. He was in the downtown Providence office of a lawyer named Maria Flores. She was a top divorce attorney, a fact reflected in her billing rate of $450 per hour. He'd found her online last night, her firm's website radiating a quiet, expensive competence. Maria was a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office, on the 20th floor of a glass tower, had a panoramic view of the city. Ronan could see the industrial dome of his own workplace at Brown in the distance. The contrast was not lost on him. He had his laptop with him. He didn't waste time with emotional preamble. He opened the machine, turned it to face her, and began. "My name is Ronan. My wife's name is Asha. She is supposed to be at a marketing conference at the Westin Copley Place in Boston. This is her current location, time-stamped yesterday afternoon." He showed her the screenshot from the Find My app. Maria Flores leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The Borgata." "Correct," Ronan said. "For the last 14 months, she has been telling me she is traveling for work. I have compiled a complete financial history of that period." He clicked through the files. The spreadsheets showing the drained savings account, the credit card statements with their endless columns of cash advances, the ATM withdrawals. He had organized it all into a single devastating dossier. He spoke for 20 minutes, his voice calm and steady, laying out the facts as if he were describing a malfunctioning boiler system. The lies, the dates, the dollar amounts. When he was finished, he closed the laptop. Maria was silent for a long moment, looking at him. Her expression was unreadable, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. "Respect. Mister," she said, her voice firm. "You have done 90% of my work for me. This is one of the cleanest cases of financial dissipation I have ever seen." Dissipation. Ronan repeated the word. It sounded so clinical for such a visceral betrayal. "The fraudulent destruction of marital assets," she clarified. "The debt she has incurred through gambling is marital debt on paper, but given this evidence of deception, we can argue that it should be assigned to her alone in the divorce settlement. What do you want?" The question hung in the air. What did he want? A week ago, he would have said he wanted his wife, his quiet life, his predictable future. Now he knew exactly what he wanted. "I want the house. It's the only real asset we have left. The mortgage is in both our names, but I've made every payment from my salary. I want her debt to be her own, and I want this to be over as quickly as possible." Maria nodded. A slow, decisive movement. "Good. Clarity is a weapon. Here is what we are going to do. We need more than bank statements. We need irrefutable proof from the source. Most of these high-end casinos have loyalty programs, players' cards. Does she have one?" Ronan's mind flashed back. He remembered seeing a sleek, black card in her wallet once, with a gold M on it. He'd asked what it was. "Oh, it's for the hotel chain my company uses," she'd said, "for points, MGM." The Borgata was an MGM property. "Yes," he said, "I think so." "Excellent," Maria said, a thin, satisfied smile on her face. "We file for divorce tomorrow morning. With the filing, we will issue an immediate subpoena to MGM Resorts International for all records associated with her player's card. We'll get her exact win-loss statements, every dollar in, every dollar out. We will also file for an ex parte emergency motion to freeze all marital assets and credit accounts. By the time she checks out of her hotel room on Sunday, her financial world will have ceased to exist." The plan was brutal. It was precise. It was exactly what he needed. He felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The technician had a blueprint. The strike was being planned. The storm was coming, and Asha had no idea she was sailing directly into it. What would you do if you were in Ronan's shoes? Would you confront her, or would you do what he did and plan a quiet, strategic strike? Let me know your thoughts down below. The strike was a study in precision. On Friday at 9 a.m., Ronan met Maria at the courthouse. He wore a simple, dark suit he'd bought for his father's funeral 5 years ago, a $300 suit from Macy's that was the most expensive piece of clothing he owned. He signed the papers, his hand steady. The divorce petition, the motion to freeze assets, the subpoena for the Borgata records. The filing fee was $120, which he paid in cash. It felt like the best money he had ever spent. By 11:30 a.m., a judge had signed the emergency order. The freeze was active. Every joint account was locked. Every credit card in her name that was linked to their finances was frozen solid. Maria had already faxed the subpoena to the legal department at MGM Resorts in Las Vegas. "They'll comply," she assured him. "They get these every day. We should have her full gambling history by Monday." Ronan went back to his empty house. The silence was immense. Every object, the $3,500 handbag on the island, the $90 face cream on the vanity, seemed like an artifact from another life, a museum of lies. He walked through the rooms feeling like a ghost. He wasn't sad. He was just empty. He was in the eye of the hurricane he had created. At 3 p.m., as instructed by Maria, he sent Asha a single, sterile text message. "Papers have been filed. A process server will meet you at the house on Sunday. Do not contact me directly. All future communication must go through my attorney, Maria Flores. Her number is enclosed." He typed the message without emotion, then put his phone on the kitchen counter, screen down. He went into the backyard and started pulling weeds from the vegetable garden with his bare hands. The rough soil, a welcome, grounding sensation. 10 minutes later, the phone inside began to ring. It rang and rang, then stopped. A moment later, it buzzed with a voicemail notification. Then it rang again and again. The assault had begun. He continued to weed the garden, his movements methodical, his mind a quiet, still place. He would listen to the messages later. For now, he would let her world unravel on its own. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the small yard. The sky turned a brilliant orange and purple. It was the most beautiful sunset he had seen in a long time. It felt like a resolution, a promise of a new day after a long, dark night. At 8 p.m., he went inside, washed the dirt from his hands, and finally picked up the phone. There were 17 missed calls and 6 voicemails. He pressed play on the first one, his fingers steady on the screen. Voicemail 1, 3:11 p.m. Her voice was confused, slightly annoyed. "Ronan, what is this? What papers? Is this some kind of joke? If it is, it's not funny. Call me back right now." Voicemail 2, 3:25 p.m. The confusion was turning to anger. "Seriously, Ronan? You're sending me a lawyer's number? How dare you? After everything I do for us, for this family. This is because you're jealous of my success, isn't it? You and your pathetic little job. You couldn't stand that I was making something of myself. Call me." Voicemail 3, 4:48 p.m. Pure, unadulterated panic. Her voice was high-pitched, strained. "My card was just declined at the front desk, the hotel card, and the Amex, and the Visa." "What did you do? Ronan, what did you do? They're saying all my cards are frozen. I can't even pay for my room? Call me back this instant." Voicemail 4, 5:30 p.m. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone he'd never heard from her before. "Baby, please pick up the phone. We can talk about this. I can explain everything. I know how it looks, but it's not what you think. I was going to tell you. I swear I was going to tell you. I just need you to talk to me. Please, Ronan, I'm scared." Voicemail 5, 6:15 p.m. Just sobbing, raw, gasping sobs that went on for a full minute before the line disconnected. Voicemail 6, 7:40 p.m. Her voice was a dead, hollow whisper, defeated. "I'm in the lobby. They made me check out. I don't have any money. Not a dollar. I don't know what to do. You've ruined me, Ronan. You've destroyed my life." He listened to all of them, one after another, his expression unchanging. He felt a distant pity, but it was like watching a news report about a stranger's tragedy. He had not ruined her life. She had made a series of choices, thousands of them, over the course of 14 months. She had pulled the handle on the slot machine, placed the bet at the blackjack table, and lied to his face time and time again. He had not set the fire. He had simply turned on the lights so they could both see the flames. The consequences were hers and hers alone. The consequences cascaded with brutal efficiency. Maria called him on Monday afternoon. The subpoenaed records from MGM had arrived. The picture they painted was even bleaker than he had imagined. "It's a complete bloodbath, Ronan," Maria said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Over the last 14 months, across 6 of their properties, she has a net loss of $214,788. The $180,000 you found was just what you could see. There were other sources of cash, other credit cards you didn't know about. First, there was the debt." Maria was confident that the family court judge, upon seeing the evidence of her systematic deception and the gambling records, would assign the entirety of the $214,000 debt to Asha. It was a mountain of debt that would follow her for the rest of her life. Second, her job. It turned out she hadn't been a marketing director for the last 8 months. She had been fired for poor performance and for embezzling money from her corporate expense account, money she had used to fund her initial gambling trips. She had been living a complete fiction, leaving the house every morning in her expensive suits and driving to a coffee shop, where she would spend the day applying for jobs or, more often, planning her next trip to a casino. The life of success she projected was a lie built on a lie. Her career was not just over, it was incinerated. Third, her assets. The few she had were vaporized. The leased BMW she drove, which she claimed was a company car, was 3 months behind on payments. It was repossessed from the curb outside her parents' house in Connecticut, where she had been forced to retreat after the Borgata debacle. A repo man had simply hooked it up and towed it away. A $65,000 car gone in an instant. Her designer wardrobe, the thousands of dollars of clothes and shoes, was all purchased on credit cards that were now in default. She would likely have to sell what she could for pennies on the dollar to pay for basic living expenses. Fourth, the house. As Ronan had requested, Maria fought for him to keep it. Given that Asha had fraudulently dissipated marital assets far exceeding her share of the home's equity, the judge awarded the house entirely to Ronan. He would have to refinance the $450,000 mortgage into his own name, which would be difficult, but not impossible on his salary. The home he had so carefully tended was his. Finally, there was the social fallout. The truth came out, as it always does. Her friends, the sharp-edged lawyers and consultants, quietly distanced themselves from the spectacular failure. Her family was horrified, their disappointment a crushing weight. She had gone from being the successful, high-powered daughter to a cautionary tale. She was 35 years old, unemployed, with no assets, living in her childhood bedroom with over $200,000 of debt hanging around her neck. Her collapse was total, a direct and enumerated consequence of her own choices. Ronan felt a quiet, somber finality. Justice wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. The scales had been rebalanced 1 year later. The sun was warm on Ronan's face. It was a quiet Sunday morning in September, and he was walking the familiar paths of Roger Williams Park. The gardens were in full bloom, a riot of late summer color. The air was clean and fresh. He wore a simple pair of jeans and a gray t-shirt. On his wrist was the same $89 Timex watch. Some things didn't need to change. He was still living in the house on Federal Hill. It was quieter now, but it was a peaceful quiet, not an empty one. He had refinanced the mortgage successfully. His budget was tight. But it was his. The house felt more like his own than it ever had before. He had painted the living room a warm, calming shade of green. Asha's expensive abstract art was gone, replaced by photographs he had taken of the campus at Brown and landscapes from around Rhode Island. Her Celine handbag was long gone, as were all the other ghosts of their shared life. He had kept his job, of course. He found more satisfaction in it than ever. The solid, tangible reality of his work was a comfort. Fixing a leak, restoring power to a building, ensuring the quiet hum of the university continued uninterrupted. It was good, honest work. His colleagues, who had known him for years as a quiet, steady presence, had rallied around him when they heard what happened, bringing him food, inviting him out, offering a simple, unspoken solidarity that meant the world to him. The most significant change in his life, however, was what he did on Tuesday nights. In the basement of a local church, he had started a new outreach chapter of Gamblers Anonymous. He wasn't a gambler himself, but he was a survivor of its fallout. He sponsored the group, making the coffee, setting up the chairs, and just being a stable, non-judgmental presence for the men and women who came seeking help. He would listen to their stories of desperation and deception that were achingly familiar. He saw Asha's face in their struggles, and for the first time he was able to truly forgive her, not for her sake, but for his own. He was transmuting his pain into purpose. He saw her one last time, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. She attended one of his meetings. He almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was different, her face was paler, and she wore a simple, inexpensive sweater and jeans. The expensive armor was gone. She looked humbled, smaller. She didn't speak during the meeting, just listened. Afterwards, she approached him. "Ronan," she said, her voice quiet. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." He looked at her, the woman who had been the center of his world, and he felt a sense of peace. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded to a dull scar. "I know, Asha," he said. "I wish you peace. I hope you find what you're looking for." He turned and walked away, not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. His life was here now, in the sunlight, in the quiet dignity of his work, in the service he provided to others. He had learned the hardest lesson of all. True wealth has nothing to do with the numbers in a bank account or the price tags on your clothes. It's not about what you own. It's about what you can't lose in a fire. It's about your integrity, your peace of mind, and the quiet, steady work of building a life of purpose. It's the feeling of warm sun on your face on a Sunday morning walk, and the knowledge that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Have you ever had to start over and build a new life from the ashes of an old one? Share your story of resilience in the comments below. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs to see today.